Liz Cheney shot up from her seat, her face flushed with anger, jabbing her finger across the chamber at Jasmine Crockett. "You don't even understand what you're saying," she barked, her voice slicing through the tense silence that had settled over the room. Yet Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't shout back, didn't even change her tone. Instead, she leaned back with composed ease, her lips curving into a steady, deliberate smile, the kind of expression that would soon transform this clash from an ordinary political exchange into a viral spectacle replayed by millions. Over the next 20 minutes, the nation would witness something rare in Congress, a young Democrat calmly dismantling a high-profile Republican, not through yelling or dramatics, but with preparation, composure, and sharp, irrefutable facts. This was no routine committee quarrel. It evolved into a defining showdown, one where Crockett's calm assurance stripped away Cheney's fury. And it was destined to be remembered. The atmosphere inside the chamber felt suspended in time. Journalists scribbled furiously, cameras zoomed in, and staffers sat motionless. Liz Cheney, daughter of former vice president, a seasoned figure hardened by years of political combat, known for her sharp retorts, believed her dominance would prevail against her younger challenger. But Crockett was ready. She had studied every document, anticipated every rebuttal, and carried the unshakable certainty of someone who knew truth was on her side. This wasn't going to send into a brawl of raised voices. It would unfold as a demonstration of how preparation humbles arrogance. And it all began with that single, unshaken smile. This confrontation had been months in the making. Cheney had long cultivated her image as one of the Republican Party's fiercest voices, a figure who could command any room through sheer intensity. Intimidation was her trademark, and the Cheney name carried enormous weight. Crockett, in contrast, was a newcomer, a first-term Democrat with little seniority but a razor-sharp intellect. Many underestimated her. But Crockett grasped an essential truth. In the court of public opinion, facts delivered with composure can cut deeper than noise or legacy. She didn't need to raise her volume to seize control. She only had to wait for Cheney to overreach and then take her apart with precision. And now, that very moment was unfolding before everyone's eyes. Cheney pressed forward with growing aggression, her voice climbing as she hurled repeated accusations meant to rattle her opponent. Crockett calmly reached for the binder before her. With measured movements, she began reading directly from the record, dates, names, policies, each detail delivered with exact clarity. Every fact struck like a hammer against glass, cracking Cheney's forceful front. The more Cheney thundered, the more Crockett's calm presence seemed to shine. The contrast could not have been starker. Fury clashing against discipline, bluster versus evidence. And it was becoming clear to everyone in the chamber who was winning. Cheney's frustration grew visible, her tone sharp yet increasingly defensive, her rhythm faltering under pressure. Crockett, however, never wavered. Her voice remained even, her focus locked, her demeanor unbroken. It wasn't only what she said, it was how she carried herself. She exuded the control of someone who had already anticipated every move, someone strategizing several steps ahead in a match Cheney thought was hers to control. Beyond the hearing room, the reaction exploded almost instantly. Social media lit up within minutes. Clips of Crockett's steady dismantling and Cheney's flustered responses spread at lightning speed. Commentators called it a masterclass in composure, a political takedown, and even the end of Cheney's aura of control. Hashtags trended, memes multiplied. And what began as a standard committee hearing quickly turned into a nationwide conversation about what it truly means to win an argument. Viewers weren't just listening to facts. They were watching the collapse of an old political approach in the face of a new one rising. Crockett's, her smile, once quiet and understated, had now transformed into something much bigger, a symbol. It was no longer just a passing expression on her face. It carried a deeper message, a message that arrogance doesn't always need to be silenced by louder arrogance, but instead can be defeated through careful preparation and unshakable self-control. Yet none of this happened by chance. Crockett's triumph was a product of a carefully thought-out plan. In the days leading up to hearing, she immersed herself in study, digging through files, transcripts, and policy papers. Every document that might appear, she read. She didn't stop at memorizing talking points. She grasped a larger context. She rehearsed not just her words, but her tone, her body language, and her timing. Crockett knew Liz Cheney's greatest strength, her raw aggression, was also her greatest weakness. If Cheney went loud, Crockett would remain quiet. If Cheney raised her voice, Crockett would lower hers. If Cheney tried bluster, Crockett would counter with facts. This wasn't just political sparring. It was psychological chess, and Crockett had already mastered the board. By the time the cameras lit up, Crockett wasn't improvising. She was following a strategy. That strategy quickly became clear once the tension escalated. Cheney accused, Crockett responded. Cheney mocked, Crockett clarified. Cheney jabbed with her finger, Crockett jabbed with facts. And with every exchange, Crockett's calm logic steadily drew the audience toward her side. She didn't have to embarrass Cheney. Cheney's behavior was doing that for her. All Crockett had to do was remain steady and let the contrast between them speak volumes. What unfolded was discipline at its sharpest, the kind most rookies can't summon under the pressure of bright lights and national cameras. Even seasoned veterans often falter in the face of such intensity. But Crockett thrived. She seemed to welcome each verbal strike, because every shout only highlighted the brilliance of her composure. For those watching from their homes, the conclusion was undeniable. This wasn't just a heated debate. It was methodical dismantling. By the end, Cheney had shifted from a bold aggressor into a rattled figure, scrambling to preserve her crumbling narrative. At one explosive moment, Liz Cheney shot up from her chair, her face flushed with anger, jabbing her finger across the committee table toward Jasmine Crockett. "You don't even know what you're talking about," she shrieked, her voice echoing against the chamber's marble walls. But Crockett did not retreat. Instead, she offered that calm, deliberate smile, the same smile that would soon make Cheney appear ridiculous in front of the entire nation. What followed over the next 20 minutes was not just a quarrel between two lawmakers. It was a moment a rising Democratic figure used nothing but facts, composure, and an unshakable smile to unravel one of Washington's most formidable Republicans. Before we dive into the breakdown of this clash, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss how it all unfolds. The committee room was electric. Every second captured on camera, destined to become one of the most talked about showdowns of the year. Cheney, the former Wyoming congresswoman known for her ferocious attacks and ironclad positions, believed she had cornered Crockett, but she couldn't have been more wrong. This is a story of how a simple smile, combined with unrelenting truth, became the sharpest weapon in American politics. To understand how this confrontation erupted, you first need to know who these two women are and what paths brought them here. Elizabeth Lynn Cheney wasn't just another name in politics. She was born into it, the daughter of former Vice President Dick Cheney. She had lived her entire life in the corridors of power. At 57, she projected the authority of someone who had rarely been told no. Cheney carved out her reputation as a hardline conservative fighter, razor-sharp with her words, skilled at intimidation, and convinced beyond question that she was the smartest person in the room. Even when she broke ranks with her own party, she did so with the same confidence and aggressive conviction that had defined her career. In congressional hearings, Cheney had a reputation for her prosecutorial edge. She leaned forward, raised her voice, and wielded her experience like a weapon, leaving younger members shaken. She had done it countless times before, and she expected nothing different this day. In her signature dark suit, with her blonde hair perfectly styled, Cheney sat at the polished mahogany table radiating authority. To her, this was another opportunity to prove she remained a dominant force in Washington. But across from her sat Jasmine Felicia Crockett, who represented everything Cheney was not. At 42, the Democratic congresswoman from Texas was still relatively new to Washington, but she had already gained attention for her sharp legal mind and her unflinching calm under fire. Unlike Cheney, who inherited her dynasty, Crockett had earned every step forward. Before arriving in Congress, she had built her career as a civil rights attorney, facing down powerful adversaries and winning. Her reputation was one of composure under fire, countering arguments not with shouting but with facts and logic. On this day, Crockett appeared as collected as ever, dressed in a sleek blue blazer, her natural hair styled with precision, her notebook open while others fidgeted. She exuded calm readiness. What Cheney didn't realize was that Crockett had prepared meticulously for this very exchange. She had studied every angle, gathered every fact, and armed herself with responses for every line of attack. While Cheney leaned on voice and legacy, Crockett leaned on something far more formidable, the truth. This was not some routine committee meeting destined to vanish in the evening news cycle. The hearing centered on policies with sweeping impact for millions of Americans, and every statement was being scrutinized by both the press and the public. For Cheney, the session was a chance to reassert her relevance, to remind everyone she could still dominate a room even after losing her primary. For Crockett, it was her chance to prove that a new generation of Democratic leaders would not be bullied by the old guard's intimidation. She was there not just as a representative of Texas, but as a voice for countless young and diverse Americans demanding to be heard. The chamber was packed with reporters, staffers, and C-SPAN cameras. Social media buzzed with anticipation. Everyone sensed that something major was about to unfold. What nobody realized was just how dramatically the tables were about to turn. Roughly an hour into the hearing, the sparks began. After the chairman concluded his opening remarks, members began their questioning. Things seemed ordinary until Crockett politely raised her hand. "Chairwoman Cheney," she began, her voice steady and professional. "I'd like to clarify something from your opening statement. You claimed proposed legislation would lead to unnecessary government overreach, but the facts don't seem to support that conclusion." Cheney's eyes narrowed instantly. She wasn't accustomed to being challenged so directly, especially not by someone she dismissed as a junior. "Congresswoman Crockett," Cheney snapped, irritation dripping from her tone, "you may want to review the actual text of the bill before making such claims." The condescension was palpable, and the room shifted uncomfortably. Crockett, however, only smiled, opening her notebook. "Oh, I have reviewed it," she replied evenly. "All 247 pages. And I've also studied the parallel legislation passed in 12 other states, along with the court challenges and their outcomes. Would you like me to share those findings?" Reporters in the back straightened, sensing the shift. Cheney's jaw tightened visibly. "Congresswoman Crockett," she said, leaning forward, "with all due respect, I've been doing this much longer than you. I understand the implications of this legislation far better than someone who's been in Washington for 5 minutes." The insult landed heavily, and murmurs rippled across the room. This was exactly the kind of dismissive attitude that had earned Cheney so many enemies over the years. But Crockett refused to take the bait. Instead, her smile grew just a little wider. "You're absolutely right that experience matters," Crockett said smoothly. "That's why I brought the experience of actually practicing law in this area for over 15 years before coming to Congress. I've seen firsthand how similar policies have played out in real courtrooms with real people." She paused, letting her words hang in the silence. "But if you prefer to rely on assumptions rather than evidence, that's certainly your choice." The room was utterly silent now, broken only by the faint clicking of camera shutters. Even the staffers had stopped shuffling papers. The tension in the air was thick, almost electric. Cheney's face was beginning to redden. She was used to opponents folding under her authority, but Crockett wasn't just standing firm. She was pushing back politely, armed with facts. "Let me be very clear," Cheney said, her voice rising slightly. "This legislation is a disaster waiting to happen. Anyone who can't see that either hasn't read it carefully enough or doesn't understand the broader constitutional issues at play." It was a classic Cheney move. Attack the intelligence and competence of her opponent instead of grapple with the argument itself. But Crockett was ready. "I appreciate your concern about constitutional issues," Crockett replied, her tone steady and measured. "Perhaps you could point to the specific constitutional provision you believe will be violated, because I reviewed the relevant case law, including the most recent circuit court decisions, and I'm not seeing the conflict you're suggesting." As she spoke, she calmly flipped through her notebook, her finger landing on neatly tabbed pages filled with notes. She wasn't speaking off the cuff. She was prepared. The contrast between Crockett's meticulous citations and Cheney's vague generalities could not have been sharper. "Are you referring to the Commerce Clause analysis from the Morrison case?" she asked evenly. "The due process concerns raised in the Williams decision, or perhaps the equal protection framework established in the landmark Brown ruling?" Each citation was delivered with quiet confidence. Crockett wasn't trying to show off. She was demonstrating that she had done the hard work, the kind of preparation Cheney clearly had not. Cheney faltered. She had expected to intimidate a first-term Democrat with her reputation and aggressive style. Instead, she found herself face-to-face with someone who not only knew the law inside and out, but also wasn't impressed by bluster. "Congresswoman Crockett," Cheney shot back, her voice now strained. I don't need a lecture on constitutional law from someone who's been grandstanding for the cameras since she got here." The personal attack was a clear sign that Cheney was losing control of the exchange. Several committee members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was exactly the kind of behavior that had made Cheney so unpopular with colleagues on both sides. But Crockett didn't respond with anger or defensiveness. She simply tilted her head slightly and kept that calm smile. "I'm sorry you feel that way," she said softly. "I was simply trying to have a substantive discussion about the legal issues. If you'd prefer not to engage with the specific constitutional questions I raised, that's fine. But I believe the American people deserve to see their representatives discuss facts rather than resort to personal attacks." The rebuke was so gently delivered that it took a moment for its full weight to register. But when it did, the effect was undeniable. You'd almost feel the air being sucked out of the room. Crockett had just called out one of Washington's most powerful Republicans for dodging substance and resorting to insults. And she had done it with such calm professionalism that Cheney's behavior looked worse in direct comparison, now visibly furious. Cheney's face flushed, her hands clenching tightly on the table before her. She had built her career on dominating these kinds of confrontations. Yet here she was, being made to look small by a younger Democrat in front of the entire nation. "You want to talk about facts?" Cheney snapped, her voice rising. "Here's a fact. This legislation is going to hurt American families, and anyone who supports it is either naive or doesn't care about the consequences." It was another dodge, another attempt to drag the debate away from constitutional law and into broad emotional appeals. But Crockett wasn't about to let her off the hook. "I absolutely want to talk about how this affects American families," Crockett replied, her smile steady as ever. "In fact, I have data from the 12 states that have already implemented similar policy. Would you like me to bring out those numbers?" Crockett asked, her tone calm but firm. "Because they clearly prove the opposite of what you're trying to claim." As she flipped open to another page of her notebook, it was obvious she had come fully armed with detailed statistics to reinforce her argument. The difference between the two women couldn't have been sharper. Crockett was organized, armed with facts, figures, and precedents, while Cheney leaned on bluster and intimidation. "The families in my district who've been directly affected by these policies have experienced real, measurable improvements in their lives," Crockett went on. "I could give you specific examples if you like, though of course I'll protect their privacy and not mention names." The willingness to cite real-life cases seemed to be the breaking point. Cheney suddenly realized she was being boxed in by someone who had done the work, while she had assumed her reputation alone would carry her through. That was the moment she snapped. What came next would dominate social media for weeks. Liz Cheney, one of Washington's most seasoned politicians, lost control in spectacular fashion. "You know what?" Cheney suddenly roared, leaping up from her chair, her voice booming off the chamber walls. "I am so sick of listening to this sanctimonious garbage." The outburst was so abrupt and so loud that a few people actually jumped in their seats. The C-SPAN camera zoomed in instantly, capturing every second of Cheney's reddened face and flailing gestures. "You walk in here with your little notebook," she shouted, her pitch rising with every word, "thinking you can lecture me on constitutional law. I was defending constitutional principles when you were still in law school." Her fingers shook furiously as she jabbed it toward Crockett, rage dripping from her expression. It was painful to watch, a high-ranking politician, unraveling on live television. "You don't know the first thing you're talking about," Cheney screamed, slamming her palm on the table. "You're nothing but a grandstanding activist who thinks she can waltz into Washington and fix everything overnight." And yet, throughout Cheney's tirade, Crockett's reaction was extraordinary. She didn't interrupt. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even look irritated. Instead, she leaned back, folded her hands, and kept the same calm, composed smile she had worn all day. The contrast was devastating. A veteran lawmaker red-faced and shouting versus a younger congresswoman sitting with quiet poise, as if humoring a child throwing a tantrum. When Cheney finally collapsed back into her chair, panting from rage, silence blanketed the room. Every eye turned toward Crockett, waiting to see what she would say. She allowed 10 full seconds to tick by, long enough for the gravity of Cheney's meltdown to sink in, but not so long as to drag out the awkwardness. "Are you finished?" Crockett asked softly, her voice so even that it only made Cheney's screaming seem more unhinged in hindsight. Cheney glared, but said nothing. "All right then," Crockett continued, her gentle smile never faltering. "I want to take a moment to explain what just happened here, because I believe the American people deserve to understand what they've just witnessed." She turned to face the C-SPAN camera directly, signaling that this was bigger than a committee spat. "Congresswoman Cheney just experienced what can only be described as an emotional breakdown, because I asked her to address the constitutional issues tied to this legislation. Rather than engage with the actual legal questions, she chose to shout at me and launch personal attacks." Crockett's delivery was conversational, as though explaining it over coffee with a friend, but her words landed with devastating force. "Now, let me be clear. I respect anyone who serves in Congress, regardless of their party. This job is tough, and most of us are trying to do our best for the American people. But what you just saw illustrates the exact dysfunction that plagues Washington. Earlier, I asked Congresswoman Cheney to identify the constitutional provisions supposedly violated by this bill. She couldn't. I pressed her to respond to the legal precedents I cited. She refused. I offered to provide real-world data from states already using similar policies. She dismissed it. Each request I made was straightforward and fact-based, and instead of addressing even one of them, she attacked me personally, questioned my motives, and then erupted into screaming when I persisted. Crockett paused deliberately, her words settling over the room like a judge addressing a jury. The American people deserve far better. They deserve leaders who engage with facts, evidence, and reasoned debate. What they don't deserve is to watch grown adults throw tantrums when asked to defend their claims with actual information. But she wasn't done. Crockett had saved her most powerful card for last. "So, since Congresswoman Cheney seems either unwilling or unable to discuss the constitutional issues, I'll address them myself for the record." What followed was a tour de force of legal reasoning. For 5 straight minutes, Crockett dissected every constitutional concern imaginable tied to the legislation. She cited specific cases, read directly from Supreme Court rulings, and explained their relevance in plain language that viewers at home could follow. It was obvious she had predicted this very confrontation and prepared meticulously. While Cheney had arrived ready to dominate with sheer force of personality, Crockett had come armed with mastery of the law. "In conclusion," she wrapped up, "every constitutional concern raised about this legislation has already been resolved by existing case law. These policies have also been successfully adopted in multiple states without legal challenge. So unless Congresswoman Cheney has a more specific objection beyond shouting, 'This is a disaster,' I think the American people have heard enough yelling for one day." She closed her notebook and fixed her gaze on Cheney. The silence that followed was crushing. Cheney sat motionless, staring at the table, visibly shaken by the humiliation. Around the room, other committee members exchanged uneasy looks. Some struggled to hide smirks, while others shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. The chairman, desperate to move past the tension, quickly announced a recess. But the damage was irreversible. In less than 20 minutes, Jasmine Crockett had dismantled one of Washington's most formidable politicians using nothing but preparation, evidence, and composure. Cheney, meanwhile, had exposed herself as unhinged and unprepared. As cameras continued to roll, Crockett calmly gathered her papers while Cheney remained frozen, clearly wrestling with the wreckage of her public image. By the time the members left the chamber, clips of the meltdown were already flooding social media. Within minutes, the digital world lit up like fireworks, replaying the footage of Cheney's furious breakdown against Crockett's unshakable calm. The hashtag Crockett smile began trending within just 30 minutes. The now iconic image of Crockett, sitting calmly, wearing that serene smile, while Cheney shouted in the background, instantly became a meme. Twitter users quickly created side-by-side comparisons with captions like, "When you did the homework versus when you didn't," and "This is what preparation looks like." One particularly viral tweet showed a screenshot of Crockett's calm face with the caption, "When someone tries to intimidate you, but you came with receipts." It was retweeted more than 50,000 times in the first hour. But the memes weren't even the most important part of the response. Political commentators from across the spectrum weighed in, with many conservatives even criticizing Cheney's behavior. A prominent Republican strategist tweeted, "I disagree with Crockett's politics, but that was a masterclass in how to handle a hostile opponent." Cheney looked completely unprofessional. A Democratic political analyst added, "This is what the future of the Democratic Party looks like. Smart, prepared, unflappable, and devastating when attacked." Even news personalities joined in. One cable news host tweeted a gif of Crockett's smile with the caption, "This smile just ended a career." By the evening news cycle, every major network was covering the confrontation. The coverage was strikingly consistent across outlets. Even conservative media struggled to defend Cheney's behavior. One cable news network ran the headline, "Veteran Congresswoman loses composure in committee hearing." Their report aired the full exchange, and the contrast between the two women looked even sharper when edited together in a news package. A major newspaper's political columnist wrote, "In 20 years of covering Washington politics, I've rarely seen such complete role reversal. The seasoned politician appeared like an amateur, while the relative newcomer showcased the kind of professionalism and preparation voters say they want." Even international outlets picked it up. A British newspaper ran the headline, "American politician's meltdown goes viral," with accompanying analysis about what the incident revealed about U.S. politics. The immediate impact on both women's careers was dramatic, but in opposite directions. For Cheney, the incident was an unmitigated disaster. Within 24 hours, video compilations of her screaming were being used in attack ads against Republican candidates in competitive districts. Her own colleagues began distancing themselves. When asked by reporters about the incident, one Republican senator bluntly said, "That's not how we should conduct ourselves in committee hearings. The American people expect better." Political donors who had previously backed Cheney quietly backed away. Some even canceled fundraising events, citing scheduling conflicts. The message was clear. Her aggressive brand of politics was no longer an asset. For Crockett, the impact was entirely different. Democratic leadership took notice immediately. The party had been searching for new voices capable of countering Republican attacks, and Crockett had just proven her ability on national television. Within a week, she was being invited onto major news programs. Producers who had never even heard of her were suddenly eager to book her. Democratic fundraising organizations reported a surge in donations explicitly linked to her name. Small dollar donors sent contributions with notes like, "Thank you for showing them how it's done," and "Keep smiling and fighting." The Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee quickly featured Crockett in fundraising materials, using her calm smile as a new symbol of the party's approach to political combat. But the significance of the clash went far beyond two individual careers. Analysts began debating what the moment revealed about the changing nature of American politics. The old model of political intimidation, using experience, aggression, and volume to dominate, had been dismantled by preparation, composure, and facts. It became a textbook example of how to handle bullying behavior in professional settings. Young political staffers across Washington began studying the video, trying to understand how Crockett had maintained composure under such intense pressure. Her method soon became a case study in political communications classes. The confrontation also highlighted a generational divide. Cheney embodied the old way, rely on reputation, launch personal attacks, and use loudness to substitute for substance. Crockett represented the new. Do your homework, stay calm, and let facts speak louder than noise. 6 months later, the effects of that 20-minute exchange were still reverberating through Washington. Crockett had become one of the most sought-after Democratic surrogates. Her ability to stay calm under pressure while delivering devastating counterarguments made her invaluable in high-stakes situations. She earned appointments to several high-profile committees and became a fixture on major news programs. Political betting markets even began listing her as a potential candidate for higher office despite her short tenure in Congress. Cheney, meanwhile, saw her influence wane further. The incident crystallized existing concerns about her temperament and judgment. Former allies grew increasingly reluctant to appear publicly with her. More importantly, the confrontation reshaped how politicians approach similar moments. The Crockett model, extensive preparation, calm delivery, and letting opponents self-destruct became the preferred strategy for handling aggression. Beyond politics, the impact spread widely. Business schools and corporate training programs began using the video as required viewing on handling hostile colleagues or clients. Women's professional organizations cited it as a case study in responding to workplace intimidation. The image of Crockett's calm smile in the face of Cheney shouting became a symbol of grace under pressure. Leadership experts analyzed how Crockett's preparation and emotional control transformed an attempted attack into a career-defining victory. The phrase Crockett smile even entered popular lexicon as shorthand for staying calm and professional while others lose composure. Political scientists and communications scholars broke down the factors behind Crockett's success. Above all was her preparation. She had clearly anticipated confrontation and armed herself with facts, legal citations, and arguments, proving that homework trumps reputation every time. This wasn't surface-level prep. She studied constitutional law, researched similar legislation in other states, and even prepared for the kinds of personal attacks politicians like Cheney often use when cornered. Her notebook wasn't a prop. It was a weapon, loaded with precision ammunition she deployed flawlessly. Experts also pointed out her strategic organization. It wasn't just about knowing facts. It was about having them arranged for quick access under pressure. The way she flipped through her notes methodically, while maintaining eye contact, highlighted the difference between simply being knowledgeable and being prepared for combat. It was a masterclass in turning composure, facts, and preparation into dominance, and all began with that calm, unforgettable smile. Equally important was Crockett's emotional control. By refusing to match Cheney's rising anger, she highlighted the sharp contrast between professionalism and chaos, allowing viewers to clearly see the difference. This wasn't just about staying calm under pressure. It was a masterclass in emotional intelligence. By keeping her composure while Cheney spiraled into rage, Crockett demonstrated the kind of leadership temperament Americans long to see in their elected officials. She understood a timeless truth. The person who loses their temper first usually loses the argument, no matter what fact they may have. Psychological studies later revealed that Crockett's steady breathing, relaxed posture, and consistent facial expression created a subconscious sense of trust and competence. Meanwhile, Cheney's wild gestures and raised voice triggered responses linked to instability and unreliability. Body language experts pointed out that Crockett's slightly tilted head and calm smile projected both confidence and approachability, creating an instant bond with viewers who saw her as someone trustworthy with important decisions. Her emphasis on substance over style proved devastating. While Cheney relied on volume and reputation, Crockett relied on facts and evidence, tools that couldn't simply be shouted down or dismissed. This was a turning point in political debates. Not about who yelled the loudest or who boasted the longest resume, but about who had truly done the work of understanding the issues. Crockett's legal training gave her a critical advantage, as she was accustomed to building arguments grounded in evidence rather than emotion. What made this even more powerful was her ability to translate complex legal principles into plain, accessible language that everyday Americans could understand. By bridging technical expertise with clear public communication, she showed that intelligence is enough. You must also connect with your audience. Her systematic citations of cases and statutes, while also explaining their real-world implications, revealed mastery of both the law and public education. Perhaps most brilliantly, she used strategic patience. Rather than attacking Cheney directly, she let Cheney unravel her own credibility. Sometimes the best defense is simply allowing your opponent to defeat themselves. This discipline was extraordinary. Many politicians would have lashed out, but Crockett knew Cheney was handing her a gift, the chance to appear professional and competent while Cheney appeared unhinged and desperate. This strategy showed a deep grasp of psychology and media dynamics, recognizing that viewers would be far more influenced by the contrast in behavior than by the technical details of the arguments. Crockett also displayed remarkable camera awareness, remembering that the exchange was being broadcast far beyond the room. Every expression, every glance mattered to millions of Americans who would see clips on TV and social media. By occasionally looking directly into the camera, keeping both herself and Cheney in frame, and maintaining expressions that read well on screen, she proved her skill in modern political communication. In fact, professors soon began using this moment in political communication courses nationwide as the perfect case study in how preparation, composure, and strategy can defeat intimidation and rage. More than just a heated exchange, it became a pivotal shift in political discourse. The old playbook of winning through aggression was exposed as not only ineffective but dangerous when facing a prepared opponent. Politicians across the spectrum began investing more in research and preparation, realizing that bluster and personal attacks were no longer enough. The confrontation also underscored the power of professionalism. Crockett's calm demeanor didn't just elevate her, it magnified Cheney's flaws. Looking back months later, it's clear this was more than a clash between two congresswomen. It was a changing of the guard in American politics. Preparation and professionalism triumphed over intimidation and volume. In our hyper-connected, social media-driven world, every public exchange can become a defining moment. Character, preparation, and composure matter more than ever because millions are watching. For anyone facing professional challenges, Crockett's example is a blueprint. Do your homework, stay calm, let the facts speak, and sometimes the strongest weapon against aggression is a confident smile. The Cheney-Crockett showdown will be remembered as the day American politics learned that the loudest voice isn't always the most powerful. Sometimes quiet confidence, backed by preparation, can do more damage than all the shouting in the world. That calm smile didn't just dismantle an argument. It helped shape a new era of political leadership. Thanks for watching this extraordinary political moment. If you enjoyed seeing how preparation and composure can triumph over bluster and volume, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We'll continue covering more of these game-changing confrontations. Until next time, remember, in politics, the most powerful response is often a confident smile paired with a well-prepared argument.